Folks, Donald Trump has nominated Ben Carson to be his administration's housing secretary. Trump announced Carson's nomination in the statements, which says, in part, "We have talked at length about my urban renewal agenda and our message of economic revival, very much including our inner cities. Ben shares my optimism about the future of our country and is part of ensuring that this is a presidency representing all Americans. He's a tough competitor and never gives up." Now, when Carson's name had been floated as a Trump cabinet secretary earlier, Carson's spokesman Armstrong Williams said that Carson had turned down a role in the administration. But this morning, I actually talked to Armstrong driving in, and he said this was the position that Carson wanted all along, because he simply believes that he really could do more helping the nation when it comes to the issue of public housing. Let's go to our panel here. A. Scott Bowden, Lauren Victoria Burke, Eugene Craig III. Your thoughts, Dr. Ben Carson, neurosurgeon, that's where he got his fame. Your thoughts about him being the HUD secretary?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think about qualifications, and then I think he's not qualified for that. He's a brilliant surgeon. He's very committed to the country and has passion. Trump needs some diversity, and this is probably the only African-American of any significance that supported Trump, and I think that's where the appointment comes from. But I think we have to hope for the best with this administration and hope that Ben Carson not only listens, but is really committed to putting dollars and policies in place to empower African-American communities.
And we know that, in fact, he's not, because he's not a housing expert. He knows nothing of this subject matter.
He does not know what he does not know.
This indicates, of course, that Donald Trump doesn't care about this subject matter, because you put somebody who has no background in it whatsoever. You know, what does he know about federal housing policy?
These are tough issues, too.
Yeah, what does he know about vouchers for Section 8? What does he know about FHFA? The good news is that Mel Watt doesn't have to leave, so Mel Watt will still be at FHFA watching this, because this makes no sense on any level. You know, obviously Ben Carson is not a housing expert. I mean, you know, he's a smart guy, but that doesn't mean he knows housing.
I feel like this: if the guy can separate twins, I'm pretty sure he can figure out housing policy.
Oh, okay.
And
yeah.
furthermore, I mean, the majority of the
I think
couple things here. Couple points here.
I'm not a neurosurgeon, but I stayed at Holiday Inn Express last night.
Couple points here. First and foremost, Trump transition team is working on policies now to come in and deal with blight in the urban city, to come in and deal with urban renewal. Secondly, a lot of the work will be done.
Just now, they're working on that.
Well, they've been working on it since midsummer, you know, since the transition team came into place. But there are experts, there are folk like Ken Blackwell and David Byrd and others that are working on serious HUD policy to come and deal with urban renewal, to come in and deal with blight in our cities. Secondly, a lot of the work will be done at the undersecretary level. We know this. That's with every secretary, with every agency head. A lot of the work is done with the director level, the undersecretary level, the actual bureaucracy level. So I do think, you know, Ben Carson could actually come out to be an amazing Secretary of HUD.
As a figurehead.
Well, what would indicate that to you?
Right.
Certainly not his resume. He's never been in a federal job, never run federal bureaucracy in any manner, and suddenly he's going to be an expert on housing policy.
And when you
for a president whose family was sued on this issue of housing discrimination.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll believe it when I see it.
This isn't Fred Trump running HUD. This has been Carson.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Okay.
I think
was his son protesting? Was his son protesting his father?
I think you look for conservative policies that I'm fearful will hurt urban America, and because of the lack of competence, or at least the lack of experience here, you don't know what you don't know. We're going to take a really close look at this, because
with several picks, by the way.
The thing is, a lot of public housing is dealt with at the local and county level.
But here's the deal, though. We talk about public housing. I've covered housing throughout my entire career. When I was a county government reporter at the Austin American-Statesman, City Hall reporter for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. What we've seen, first of all, over the past 20 years, we've actually seen a shift, if you will, in traditional public housing. We saw when Jack Kemp was at HUD. We saw when Henry Cisneros was at HUD as well, where you had dispersed housing, where you had folks shifting away from the large public complexes. I mean, look, the reality is this. The real question is, will this administration, and I believe the answer is no, will this administration deal with how developers have been pimping the process of saying we're going to build affordable housing when they get these huge tax breaks from city, counties, and states when it comes to building? And what we've seen, and I saw it personally in Chicago, we've seen this in other cities around the country, where developers get these deals, they do all this massive development downtown downtown, near downtown, and what they deem to be affordable isn't affordable, and it ends up being housing for young white workers who then come in. And so then what happens is this here. Then, of course, the people who are displaced, they're pushed out of cities, pushed to suburbs, where it used to be where you had inner cities for folks who were low income. Now all of a sudden, because whites left, now you have whites who are coming back into cities and moving those folks out. They don't have access to public transportation to those places, access to jobs, and so all of a sudden it's happening in reverse. That's the question I want to know. Will the Trump administration stop a lot of those? Hold on, one second, Lauren, Eugene, Lauren, then Scott.
The thing is this: the majority of urban housing policy, especially when it comes to public housing, is done at the local, county, city, municipal level. Yes, the feds may provide some level of funding, but the overwhelming amount is done at the local level. And I think it's
Eugene. I understand. I say it. I've covered it. But when you still have Washington providing billions and billions of dollars, again, the question I have on those policies, will they be reining in those developers who again given major tax credits and they're not providing affordable housing?
My argument is that those tax credits, a lot of those tax deals, people in Baltimore are dealing with it right now. A lot of those tax deals are done and cut at the local level. The feds have, I can't come in and tell the city government to come in and how to distribute them.
The local level argument when they want to dodge the fact that the federal government is doling out billions of dollars. What's going to end up happening with this, as somebody who has worked in the federal government and covered Congress, is that the real people who will be in power on this policy will be in Congress. Because what tends to happen when you get these policy novices in charge of a huge federal bureaucracy, billions of dollars and thousands of people, is they sort of just don't do anything, and Congress is the one that sort of functions the policy. And we're probably going to see that with a few things, because let's face it, Big Carson doesn't know what he's doing. He'll get to travel around and smile and grin, on his junkets, but he's not going to make any real decisions because he doesn't know what he's doing.
Listen, the market forces work against poor and low-income African Americans, which get pushed out. That's the first thing. This is the first thing. But secondly, HUD has a big stick, new market tax credits. What they really need to do, and what we ought to be looking for, is whether jobs, job training, and entrepreneurship are tied to these tax credits, are tied to these developments, so that African Americans who are poor and disenfranchised have a fighting chance to compete for that low-income housing, or to just pull themselves up out of poverty with that big stick. That's what we ought to be looking for.
Well, again, the biggest issue for me is what has been happening in these cities. Well, these developers have frankly been pimping a process, getting millions and millions of dollars in breaks, and they promise affordable housing. But then all of a sudden, when it comes, you have very few housing units because they are going after, white, urbane homeowners. And what they're doing is they're building all of these mixed-use developments. They're building these, all of a sudden, these downtown grocery stores and retail offices, and then you have places selling for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, and the very people who need affordable housing can't afford to live in those places.
But that's market-driven. That's anecdotal. What empirical data do you have to support that?
Scott,
what data
do you have to support it? Somebody who's actually been covering housing for 20 years. You're saying it's market-driven? No, that's not what it is. No, Scott, this is not what's happening. What is happening is these cities across this country, what they want to do, they want to move these folks out. They're giving the developers, again, the developers are promising, we're going to build affordable housing for people who can afford it. No, they're not.
But they're building. It's an enforcement issue then. Let's
Scott, that's my point.
Then we agree on two things now. We agree on two things.
Have you been like asleep the last 6 minutes of this segment?
You cannot continue to just call racism when you're talking about gentrification.
No, Scott, I never used the word racism.
I didn't use the word.
No, I didn't. No, Scott. First of all, Scott, I didn't. No, Scott.
Let's find a way to keep them in.
First, I didn't say white developers. Two, I didn't say pushing black people out. Developers are also pushing out poor white people, poor Hispanic people, poor black people. And so that's my point. And what I'm saying is we're seeing it in cities across the country where, again, developers are reaping millions and millions of dollars in tax credits all across this country, in cities across this country. And the people who need the housing, they're being forced to go out to suburban areas. And what happens is no transportation in many of those places, no jobs out there. So now they're saying, now also I can't afford to live out there. And what I'm saying is this here, the federal government is the one who should be enforcing these issues, and that's what's not happening. And so I don't give a damn about what's market driven. I care about whether or not regular, ordinary people can have affordable housing. And the fact of the matter is, they're not able to have it. And that's a problem.
I started my comment out with look for HUD with the big stick to enforce the very issues that you want to address.
Well, first of all, when you already have, according to some stories, that Ben Carson doesn't believe in the Fair Housing Act, and that is when it comes to racial discrimination,
He knows what it is.
that might be a problem. That might be a problem.
Let's stay Scott believes in market forces.
Huh? Yeah, well,
Apparently the Democrat Party believes in market forces
it's
now.
quite obvious he does. Yeah, knock yourself out. Yeah, but you're right. You don't need to worry about affordable housing. A bunch of folks out there have to worry about affordable housing.
Kickstart your day at 7 and get the news you need from the perspective you want. NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Every weekday morning at 7 on TV1.